Good evening, everybody joining online, and good evening again, everybody here. Let us take a moment to arrive here in this room or in front of your device at home, on the cushion, those who are here, or on the chair in front of your device at home. Let us take a moment to feel the cushion or the chair we are sitting on. Let us take a moment to arrive for this session, leaving our worries outside. Let us take 3 deep and slow breaths. Deep so that the stomach rises and falls every time we breathe in and out. As we breathe in, we try to bring our attention to the present moment. As we breathe out, we try to relax. So today during this session, it will be divided in 2 main parts. The first one, we will do a calm abiding meditation to try and train our concentration, which will also enable us to become more present for the analytical discussion and meditation we'll do after that. Today the topic we'll talk about is the truth of suffering, which is actually the very first teaching the Buddha gave. You know, just as he achieved awakening in present-day Bodh Gaya in Bihar, he remained silent for 49 days. And after 49 days, the gods descended from the heavens to request him to teach. For 49 days, he thought, the truth that I have found is so difficult to fathom that I cannot, really teach it and explain it to the common man. But because he displayed, having found the truth and having pacified his mind, the gods descended from heaven to request him, please, teach. Please teach us, and please teach all sentient beings who are trapped. And so that's 49 days later, and this teaching happened in present-day Sarnath, which is just next to Varanasi. So this is what we'll talk about today. And this is in the context of the graduated path to awakening. Graduated path to awakening. Awakening is that state of a Buddha, that state of total liberation from any kind of fear, any kind of suffering, any kind of disturbing emotions, but also all our mental veils are removed in that state of awakening. Becoming a Buddha also means having achieved a state of omniscience, where we can perfectly know how to guide others without making mistakes through this omniscience. So this is, I think, the 6th session on the graduated path that we are doing. So it's not only a passive session where I'm talking and you're listening, it's very interactive. Apart from the times where meditation is guided, there are opportunities to exchange and interact. People online as well, feel free to, unmute yourselves when we exchange. Especially after the introduction of the topic, where I'll talk in a little bit more detail about the truth of suffering. Then we have a first opportunity for interaction. And then also after the guided analytical meditation, there will be another opportunity for discussion. So the first 5 sessions we started a few months back before the summer break. And last week we had the 5th session. So the first session we talked about the nature of the mind. What is mind? We defined what is mind, which is synonymous with consciousness or awareness. And we saw that this mind is beginningless and also endless. Since beginningless time, we go from life to life to life to life to life because of our karmas and afflictions or mental veils or disturbing emotions, if you will. Because of that, without any control, we take rebirth again and again and again, since time immemorial, and until we purify our mind forever. So we also saw the real nature of the mind is not that those mental veils, those karmas and so forth. Naturally, the mind is unstained. You can imagine like a beautiful jewel. That would be the true nature of the mind. And at the moment, perhaps this jewel is surrounded by mud or something like that. Our, mental afflictions like anger, jealousy, pride, hatred, depression, anxiety, you name it. The Buddha talked about 84,000 of such disturbing emotions that we have. So the nature of the mind is not those. Those are advantages. They can be removed. They can be eliminated. The true nature of the mind is pure love, pure wisdom, pure compassion. It's really a beautiful mind that we all have. Even, the mosquitoes that draw our blood, they also have that. All sentient beings are said to have that nature. In essence, the mind is pure, free from all these disturbing emotions. We all have the potential to become Buddhas, to achieve awakening. So that was the first session. The second session, we talked about our present condition. Especially people like us here, being born as human on this planet, and specifically in a country that is not at war, meaning we have, thanks to that, we have a lot of freedoms. Not only that, we are born, with all our faculties, mental, physical. Not only that, we are in a world where the Buddha appeared 2,500 years ago. The Buddha taught. His teachings are still very much available to this day. Especially, with internet, we can very easily learn about the teachings of the Buddha. Not only that, there are many followers and many people who support the followers. The fact that centers like this exist around the world is really due to the generosity of, kind people who support our efforts. So not only that, we are interested to actually make efforts. We are interested to look inwards, to look at the mind and not only be distracted with whatever is happening, distraction of the senses. Tonight we decided to come here instead of, going for, something very, worldly pleasure of the senses. We could have, went to a party or something like that. Instead, we decided to come here and look at our minds, think, meditate, try to improve our present condition. No? So having all these leisures, opportunities, and freedoms is what we call in technical terms having a precious human life or a precious human rebirth that is very rare to get. If you look even at the level of the planet, if you just consider this one planet, how many human beings are there? I think at present 8.2 billion or something like that. If you just compare that with the number of ants, that are on the planet, there are numberless, countless ants on this planet, and in comparison, only 8.2 billion. So already from that perspective, it is rare. Now, among these 8.2 humans, how many actually have that precious human life? How many live in a country that is not at war? How many are interested to look at the mind and not completely, overwhelmed by the pleasure of the senses or slavery or, just have to work so much just to survive, There's so many people who actually don't have, even though they are human, they don't have all these freedoms that qualify to have a precious human life. And some, even if they are interested to look inwards, to look at their mind, to look at their present condition, even if they have that, perhaps they just don't have the time. So the third session, we saw that this present opportunity that we have, that is so rare and precious, eventually it will come to an end. The third session, we talked about the inevitability of death, the reality of impermanence, that, inevitably, whatever we do, at one point, we will pass away from this life. There is no other choice, Let's say about 100 years from now, all of us in this room will not be there anymore, right? Most likely. We can think people who were famous in the 19th century, nobody is there anymore, right? None of these celebrities from the 19th century are still around. It's inevitable that we will die, and also the time of our death is completely uncertain. We do not know when that inevitable event will happen. We have no idea when we will pass away. And therefore it is logical to think that we might even die today or tomorrow. For all we know, before the end of this session, something might happen and our life is over. We don't know. There are so many causes for death, so many accidents, diseases that can happen at any time. We don't really have a choice or a control over that. So the conclusion of that session was that since death is definite and its time is not definite, we don't know how much time we have left to do some work on our mind while we have this precious human life. Therefore, it's a very good idea to start now, without wasting too much time. And to do it sincerely also. Then, I think you were there for the session before the break, which was on refuge. Before the summer break, we talked about refuge, and especially all the kinds of refuges we go for, when events in our life don't happen the way we want. What do we turn to when we are experiencing difficulties? Some of us take refuge in alcohol, for example, in food, in parties. We all have all kinds of different refuges. Some people, their coping mechanisms would be, to reach for chocolate or to reach for the smartphone, or And so in that session before the summer break, we looked how these coping mechanisms, these refuges, are actually not very reliable, and they are also not solving our problems. Let's say we have problems at work, or we have difficulties in our family, then we go for these: alcohol, video games, or I don't know whatever, chocolate, whatever kind of coping mechanisms that you might have. They are not solving the problem, right? It's just like escaping our problem, or perhaps even creating more problems in the case of eating too much chocolate or drinking alcohol or things like that. And so we saw that there is one refuge that is actually reliable, which is taking refuge in what can liberate our minds from their conditions of, taking rebirth and again and again without control, taking rebirth because of our karmas, taking rebirth because of our disturbing emotions. So we saw that there is an antidote to that. We can actually eradicate our disturbing emotions. We can eradicate our suffering. And we can cease to take rebirth again and again in what we call samsara in Sanskrit, this cyclic existence that we have been going through from beginning of this life, and until we put an end to it, it's going to be forever. So the antidote is precisely what the Buddha has found, which is It is known as the middle way, free from the two extremes. At the moment we apprehend everything as existing very solidly, very independently, everything we apprehend, everything we interact with, we feel that they exist in and of themselves. And we have also that impression with regards to ourselves, with our me, I, myself. We feel that this exists very solidly there, very objectively, independent from anything else. And this is what the Buddha identified as the source of all our problems, because of this impression that everything is so solid, so inherent, and especially the I, we feel that this I is the center of the whole universe. We feel that this I is more important than anything else and anyone else. And therefore we want to cherish that I, me, more than anything else. And this is where all our disturbing emotions come to arise: anger, jealousy, anxiety, depression, pride, and so on and so forth. Because of these, we engage in actions that are sometimes negative. Out of a very strong desire or attachment, we might lie, we might steal, we might say harsh words, we might even, hurt someone or kill someone because of these disturbing emotions. So the antidote that the Buddha has found to the root of all that, to our what we call self-grasping ignorance, grasping at everything to be existing very solidly, very intrinsically independent from anything else, the Buddha has identified the exact opposite, which is free from the two extremes. We call the extreme of existence, like a very solid existence, but also free from non-existence. It is not that things don't exist. It is not that the I doesn't exist. The middle way is to see that it exists, but it doesn't exist objectively. Things don't exist independently. Things don't exist in and of themselves. So realizing in our own experience the way things exist, free from the two extremes. Things don't have an inherent existence. It's not also that things don't exist. Things exist in a way that is free from inherent existence. Realizing that emptiness of inherent existence is what frees us. That's what removes our disturbing emotions. That's what purifies our mind. So this is a solid, reliable refuge, that wisdom. This is called, in technical terms, taking refuge in the actual dharma. Dharma, in general, when we talk about dharma, we talk about teachings. But if we want to be very precise, what is dharma, or Buddha dharma? It is that wisdom which purifies our minds. So that's what we explored before the break, that this is a refuge that is reliable, and that is actually helping us in comparison with chocolate, alcohol, and so forth, that don't help us and even create more problems for us. Then last week, we explored the law of karma, and especially the different characteristics of karma. The fact that every time we engage in an action that serves as a cause, that inevitably will give rise to a result. And we talked specifically about virtuous and non-virtuous karmas. I think in everyday life we say good or bad karmas. Actions that are done with a good intention and bring about a good result, that help others, that are beneficial. Inevitably, they will ripen in the form of a pleasant experience or some kind of worldly happiness. On the other hand, actions that are not virtuous, not done with an intention to be beneficial or with a lot of self-interest, such as we were talking about, stealing, lying, killing, hurting, using harsh words and so forth. Anything that might actually hurt others inevitably serves as a cause for us in the future to experience an unpleasant moment, to experience pain or sorrow or a sensation that is unpleasant. So we also talked about the fact that unless we purify our negative karmas, they will give rise to a result eventually. It might be in 500 lifetimes. Something we do in this life might ripen in 500 lifetimes. But negative actions can be actually purified. And we regularly do this at Tushita with the practice of Vajrasattva in the context of the 4 opponent powers, which are the 4 direct antidotes of a complete, we call it a complete path of action to accumulate a karma. So through such practices, negative karmas can actually be purified. We also talked about the fact that even the good actions we do, in one moment of anger, they can be, the potential of the good actions we do, such as helping others, or practicing generosity, or, working on our minds and so forth. Even these good actions, they can be eliminated by anger. Anger is so gross, so powerful, that it has the power to destroy the positive potential we create in our mind. This positive potential, in technical terms, we call it merit. So it is a good idea when we accumulate merits, when we do actions that help others, or that helps our mind, it is good to dedicate those actions towards our goal of total liberation from all these disturbing emotions and full awakening. So when we dedicate properly our virtues, then it is as if, if you walk in the street in a not a very good neighborhood and you have, I don't know, let's say 10,000 rupees in your pocket. If you run into a thief, the thief can actually take the 10,000 rupees. But if before going into that street, you went to the bank and deposited those 10,000 rupees, then in that street, the thief will have nothing to take from you. So dedicating our virtues works in a similar way. When we get angry, if the virtues are dedicated properly, then anger doesn't have the power to destroy those. So we also talked about the fact that whatever we experience, pleasant and unpleasant experiences that we have, they are all the results of the karmas we have accumulated in the past. So this is what we contemplated last week and in the first 5 sessions. So today we'll explore the truth of suffering. But before we do that, let us also take a moment to do a calm abiding meditation to arrive in this space, and we'll talk about the truth of suffering, and then we will have first opportunity to exchange and interact. But before that, let us do a few minutes calm abiding meditation. Calm abiding is actually the English translation that we use for shamatha. Shamatha, or that's the Sanskrit word, and in Tibetan we call shine, calm abiding, or specifically what we are doing here is a single-pointed concentration, single-pointed meditation. So we have a few new people here, so I will quickly give the summary of the instructions to do that meditation. The first thing we want to look at is how we sit, our body posture. The best is, like most of you here, sitting on the floor, but if you're sitting on the chair, it's also perfectly fine. Just make sure you're not leaning against the support of the chair and not leaning forward either. Make sure your body is upright. Ideally also on the chair, both of your feet are flat on the floor, and if the floor is too low for you, you can place a cushion under your feet, giving some space between your 2 legs and 2 feet. If you're sitting on the floor, the best would be to sit in what is called the full lotus posture. So what that means is that both feet are resting on the opposite leg, but that might be a little bit challenging. Make sure you're not pushing your body. Make sure you're sitting comfortably, that you can, sustain this position. You can simply sit even in a half lotus with just one foot on top of the opposite leg, or you can simply sit cross-legged naturally, or you can even sit the way they sit in Myanmar, which is one leg in front of the other. That's also a perfectly, a posture that is completely fine. Then traditionally, we place our hands in the concentration mudra, meaning we have our right hand on top of the left, the two thumbs slightly touching, forming a triangle, and this mudra rests on our lap, in our lap. It's a Dhyan mudra, or the mudra of concentration. Allow some space between your arms and your body. The back is straight, the body is upright. You can imagine there is like a string pulling from the crown of your head, keeping your body upright, but at the same time, the body is not stiff. The shoulders are relaxed, and even the body is relaxed. You can easily turn from left to right. You're sitting straight, but not in a stiff way. Just as soon as the body is upright, you can just relax everything else. Only what is called the bones in the back. What's the English for that? The spine, yeah. The spine is straight. So make sure the spine is straight, but all the other parts of the body completely relaxed. The neck is actually aligned in the continuation of the spine. You can very gently tilt the head forward, but not too much. If we tilt forward too much, then we have a tendency to fall asleep. Then if the head is facing upwards too much, then more thoughts will, distract us. So we try to find again the middle way, which is just in the continuation of the spine for the neck, very gently tilted forward. We can also place our tongue just behind our upper teeth towards the upper palate, and this helps to reduce the production of saliva while we meditate. And finally, the eyes. Traditionally, we don't meditate with the eyes completely closed. We leave them very slightly opened to allow some light to enter. This helps to keep us alert. So if we train, when we are new with meditation, if we train from the beginning with eyes closed, then it becomes a habit to meditate only with eyes closed. Then trying to meditate with eyes open becomes difficult. But when we meditate with eyes slightly opened, from the beginning, from the outset, then in the future we can choose open or close, then both, are easy. So this body posture with those 7 points is known as the Buddha Vairochana meditation posture. And if you have to remember only one of the 7 points, the most important is for the body to be upright. So this is for the body. Now let us look at the actual meditation. What are we actually meditating on? So we said the eyes slightly opened, and perhaps while we meditate, I don't know, a fly will come or something will distract us. We don't pay attention to that. It is not the eyes that meditate. No, it is the mental consciousness. So the eyes, we just rest our gaze in the space in front of us, about 45 degrees cast down, but we don't actually pay attention to whatever appears. We try to pay 100% attention to our object of meditation, which is a mental object. So there are countless objects we can use for meditation. And for those of us who are new, what I would recommend is that we use the breathing sensation as an object, because it's an object that is always with us, as long as we are alive, so we can always come back to that object. So most commonly, we take that breathing sensation at the entrance of the nostrils as an object. Not the entrance of the nostrils as such, not the body part as such, but the sensation as you breathe in and out. As you breathe in, you will observe, perhaps a little bit of a cooling sensation there. As you breathe out, perhaps a little bit of a warmer sensation there. This is a good object of focus, especially if you tend to fall asleep if it was a long day for you or something like that. But if you're like me, you have a lot of thoughts and it's difficult to rest the mind. In some Buddhist countries, what they recommend then is to focus on the breathing sensation in the abdomen. So this helps to, calm the mind from all these thoughts. Focus on a lower, we don't focus on the body part as such. Again, the breathing sensation there, but bringing our attention a bit lower can help for the thoughts, all the disturbing thoughts that we have. So we saw the body posture, the object of meditation. We'll try to remain focused on that object of meditation for the duration of the meditation, about 5 minutes. But you will see that during those 5 minutes, we will get distracted again and again, especially, if this is new for us and, in a modern world with so many things, taking our attention, notifications, lights, and so forth, it's difficult for us to focus. So the two main ways we tend to get distracted when we try to meditate is with mental excitement and mental laxity. Mental excitement, it is basically our thoughts. Mostly we think about the past or the future instead of focusing on our object of meditation, the breathing sensation or another object. We might, for example, think about our plans for tonight or something that happened earlier today that is still, with us in the mind, and we are thinking about it again and again, instead of focusing on our object of meditation. So instead of using our mind, basically our mind is using us or tricking us, no? And the other way we tend to get distracted, especially, if you had a long day, is with mental laxity or mental lethargy. We might sit here, try to meditate. The object of meditation is not very interesting and we are tired. So we might, start to fall asleep. The mind starts to sink. We start daydreaming. This is the mental laxity or dullness or lethargy. So these two ways we tend to get distracted, mental excitement, mental laxity. Fortunately for us, they have antidotes. And these antidotes are called introspection and mindfulness. Introspection, you can imagine that while you are meditating, there is like an agent in the background of your mind. And what is this agent doing? It is looking, it is checking, what is my mind doing? Is it focused on my object of meditation? Or is it distracted with thoughts or with lethargy? And the moment introspection notices that the mind is not focused, we use mindfulness. The role of mindfulness is to bring the mind back. Wherever it is, we bring it back to our object of meditation. So we'll do that for 5 minutes. Perhaps if you have a lot of experience in meditation, during those 5 minutes, you will only be distracted 5 or 10 times. But if you're like me, maybe in 5 minutes, you will be distracted 30 or 40 times. It doesn't matter the number of times you get distracted. What matters is, first of all, to notice it. And then when you notice it, to gently bring the mind back with mindfulness. To try and gain control over our minds. Now, if we notice it and we don't do anything about it, then we are just, strengthening our bad habits, basically. So let us try for about 5 minutes to make use of introspection and mindfulness and to remain focused on our object of meditation. I always use the analogy, you can imagine if you have a pet dog at home, the dog runs away from home. Introspection will notice that the dog is gone. Mindfulness brings the dog back home. You can also imagine tying him against a pillar so that he remains there. It's a little bit similar to what we are trying to do for our minds for about 5 minutes. You can gently come out of the meditation. Were you able to focus for 5 minutes without distraction? Anybody? How many times were you distracted? Were you able to use the antidotes? Yeah. So 5 minutes might feel short. Perhaps at the end of my 5 minutes, we feel, oh no, I wanted to, do it a little bit longer. So this is a good sign that, in the future, we will happily engage in that practice again. Especially as beginners, if we, try to sit for 1 or 2 hours, it's really too long. We might be completely exhausted at the end of 1 or 2 hours, and then the next time we see our meditation cushion, we feel like, oh no, I don't want to go through that again, So it is advised actually to keep our sessions short when we begin with meditation, just a few minutes. Even if you can do every morning, every evening, 1 or 2 minutes, that's already very beneficial. Especially if for those few minutes, you make the commitment. Okay, it is a short time, but for that short time, I will really use the antidotes of introspection of mindfulness. So that will be much more beneficial, even if it's just 1 minute or even 30 seconds, if you can do that, training your mind in using the antidotes, then you will become familiar with these antidotes. Much more beneficial than sitting for 1 or 2 hours and just let yourself be distracted with so many thoughts or lethargy, falling asleep. That doesn't really help us. It just reinforces our bad habits. So hopefully this helped, to be a little bit more concentrated for this session. And now we can talk about the topic of today, which is the truth of suffering, the very first teaching that the Buddha gave. And what we will talk about specifically is the 3 kinds of suffering that the Buddha talked about. The 3, main categories of suffering. So they are, the first one is the evident suffering that we can very easily relate to, which is called suffering of pain, or some call it or translate it as suffering of suffering, the evident suffering, basically. The second type of suffering the Buddha talked about is the suffering of change. Finally, the third type of suffering the Buddha talked about is the all-pervasive suffering, or the all-pervasive compounded suffering. There are different ways to translate it into English. So the first one, very obvious, it is associated with our unpleasant experiences, any kind of pain, sorrow, fear. All these experiences fall in that category. If I wound myself, harm myself, and I have pain here in my arm, that is one of these examples, a very evident suffering. Second type of suffering, the suffering of change, it is related to our pleasant sensations. For example, if you feel hot, coming here, there is the AC, you feel the breeze, this gives you a pleasant sensation. This is related to the second type of suffering, the suffering of change. Now, the third type of suffering is associated with our neutral experiences that are neither pleasant or unpleasant. So let us discuss more in detail what these 3 are. So first of all, the suffering of suffering. Although it is very evident, the Buddha gave a very extensive list, of all the sufferings we go through. And the reason for that is to generate a wish to be free, from any kind of suffering, which is essential. If we don't have that wish to be free from suffering, to not experience pain, misery, sorrow, and so forth, if we don't wish for that, then what will make us come here, for example? What will make us, want to look at our mind? If we don't have that wish, if we are just happy about anything and we don't mind unpleasant experiences in our lives, if we don't mind, I don't know, fighting with our neighbor and so forth, then there is no reason to actually do something about our minds, no? If we don't identify what suffering is. So for the suffering of suffering, the evident suffering, the first one in our life is evident is birth. Already at the time of birth, we suffer. And we even, in fact, we cry, no? It's already we leaving the womb. Already that experience is painful. Then immediately after being born, we start suffering from aging. You know, every second we are closer to the moment of our death, and that starts already at birth. And of course, aging as a baby doesn't matter, but perhaps most of us now already, you know, we look in the mirror and we see some gray hair. This brings an unpleasant experience, or we see some, how do you call this in English? The marks on the forehead, wrinkles, you know. So this brings again, for most of us, brings an unpleasant sensation. Our strength, you know, diminishes. Even our senses, you know, they decline gradually, slowly. Perhaps many people, when they get older, they enjoy the pleasures of life less and less, you know. Everything kind of declines, deteriorates, degenerates gradually as we age. Especially the closer, you know, we get to death. So then the Buddha also talked about the suffering of sickness, also very evident, very manifest kind of suffering that most of us inevitably go through, whether it be it's a simple cold or an injury or, you know, more difficult diseases such as cancer and so forth. There are so many diseases, and evidently this is one of the suffering experiences that are categorized as suffering or suffering of pain. The pain there is obvious, and you know, when we are very sick from let's say a flu, the only thing we want is to be in bed, and nothing attracts us. We don't want to go outside. We don't even have the energy for it. You know, those kind of things. Then the Buddha talked about the suffering of death. Even that, the suffering of birth already is painful. The suffering of death, if you are not prepared, can be super, you know, you can be super afraid of it. It can be very frightening. You know, the fear of losing our body, losing our possessions, being separated from our near and dear ones, that can be very, very painful. But it's also a kind of very obvious suffering we go through at the time of death. Then the Buddha talked about the suffering of meeting with things we don't want to meet, or experiencing things we don't want to experience. Let's say we have an annoying neighbor, and that neighbor comes and starts complaining about all sorts of things. This is the kind of experiences we don't want to go through. No? Then there's the opposite, the suffering of being separated from what we enjoy, being separated from experiences that we like, that we want to repeat again and again. There's also the suffering of not obtaining what we desire, not obtaining what we want, which is the same kind of suffering as experiencing what we don't want to experience. So this is a list of a few of the very evident sufferings that are classified as the suffering of pain or suffering of suffering. But you can think of so many others, right? In our day-to-day experiences, or when we observe the lives of others, you know, we can think of people who are living in the streets, people who are suffering from poverty. We can think of, you know, people who are living in countries that are at war, and so on and so forth. Then the second type of suffering, suffering of change. This one is much more subtle and difficult to identify. So when it comes to the suffering of change, as I was saying, it is associated with our pleasant experiences, and that is why it is difficult to identify. So I was talking earlier about if you feel hot and you come in this meditation hall and you enjoy, the cooling breeze coming from the AC, the Buddha would classify that as a suffering of change. It's a pleasant experience, as long as you're not feeling too cold. No, perhaps for some of you that AC is too cold. So if that is a pleasant experience, that you're enjoying this breeze from the AC, this cold air, that is known as suffering of change. Why is it, even though it is a pleasant experience, why is it classified in the three types of suffering? Is because, as we were talking earlier about the different kinds of coping mechanisms that we have, the different refuges we turn to, that is not reliable. That is not something also that will, that's not something we will not always experience that pleasure. Inevitably, it is the nature of samsara. As long as we have our karmas and mental veils, our disturbing emotions, inevitably we will have unpleasant experiences at one point or the other. Even though we might be enjoying that breeze, so all of a sudden we might start having a headache, or there might be a power cut, or that experience of pleasure is not, in our condition, in samsara, is not something sustainable, is not something that we can rely on all the time. So what that means is that these pleasant experiences are not the happiness that we are seeking. They are not the absence of pain, misery, suffering that we are seeking. What we are seeking, what we are looking for, is a happiness that is everlasting, a happiness that basically constantly brings us in a state of bliss, that we constantly have a pleasant experience. Obviously, that pleasant feeling from the cooling of the AC is not that everlasting happiness for some of the reasons we talked about. But this is true for any kind of pleasant experience. Enjoying a nice cake, huh? The cheesecake. I don't know, any kind of pleasant experiences you can think about, the Buddha classified as suffering of change. And also why it is there as a suffering of change is because when it comes to cheesecake, for example, perhaps we have a strong attachment for cheesecake, like me. Then, again, something happens, and I will turn to cheesecake as a coping mechanism. And I will again and again crave for cheesecake every day, But this will not bring me happiness, same as the AC, it's totally unreliable. Perhaps I will order a cheesecake on Zomato and it will not be tasty, or it will be, 3 days old, or even if it is good, and because I wanted a lot of cheesecake, I will have ordered, 3, 4, 5 pieces because something really bad happened and I really wanted to turn to cheesecake. So after, of course, the first bite will be very pleasant, but then I will eat more and more and more. Maybe after the third piece, I will be like, oh, this is becoming disgusting, So in that sense, we also see that pleasure is not the everlasting pleasure I'm looking for. But on the opposite, these pleasures that we keep on craving for, they even distract us from turning to the real antidote, turning to the real refuge we talked about earlier, the wisdom that realizes the nature of reality. So suffering of changes, our cravings, they trap us in samsara. They maintain us in cyclic existence. They distract us from removing our disturbing emotions, purifying our karmas, changing, transforming our minds. Of course, we talk about cheesecake, we talk about AC, but there are so many, we can talk about, and yeah, we can very easily relate to that. So all these pleasures, suffering of change. Then the third one, the pervasive, all-pervasive suffering, or the pervasive compounded suffering. There are different ways to translate that into English. This is associated with our neutral feelings. As long as we have disturbing emotions, as long as we have afflictions, such as, first of all, the root, this ignorance that grasps a thing to be very solidly, independently, objectively existent, anger, excessive desire, pride, jealousy, and so forth. As long as we have these disturbing emotions, we have that all-pervaded compounded suffering, that pervasive suffering, which basically means that we are remaining in cyclic existence, we are remaining in samsara with this body and mind. And when that life ends, again, the mind will leave the body due to karma, as we discussed last week. We'll get reborn in a new body, maybe human, maybe non-human, most likely non-human, depending what we do in this life. So, and this is the cycle that we've been going through since beginningless time and until the end of time. Well, no, there is no end of time, forever, until we, cut the root of that, which is this self-grasping ignorance that apprehends everything as very solid, very objective. That is the pervasive compounded suffering that is due to our disturbing emotions, our afflictions, our mental veils, our karmas, and so forth. And we call them pervasive. We call this suffering pervasive, related to our body and mind, because that present body and mind, samsaric body, samsaric mind, are the basis, to create more suffering in samsara, to remain in samsara, until that mind is transformed, these afflictions are removed, these mental veils are removed. This body and mind will remain in that pervasive compounded suffering. Even when I die, if I didn't transform my mind, again, take rebirth, we'll have the same innate disturbing emotions until they are purified again and again and again. Does that make sense? Anybody would like? I will also online give you the possibility to unmute. And you also already wanted to say something, no? So for those of us who are here, we can pass this small microphone around so that the people who are joining from home, they can also hear what we are discussing. Yeah.
So I had a question which is related to the conversation we had last week. I mean, I was not there, but you were giving a recap. So you mentioned that you gave an analogy that just like if an amount we have in form of cash, if it's deposited in bank, it cannot be stolen. And you related that with merit, right? So could you please expand on that, because I did not attend the last session.
Right, sure.
Yeah. So if it works, I'm requesting to go back to the previous session.
So let's say our virtuous actions, our virtuous thoughts, even though they can be powerful, they're also a bit feeble, because these are in touch with reality, but since time immemorial, we have been, under the power, under the control of our disturbing emotions, such as anger. In this case, we'll talk about anger. We're so familiar with anger. Since time immemorial, we had anger, very familiar with it. As soon as, something doesn't happen the way we want, we get irritated, or, we get angry, we start, you can feel that your body is contracting and you want to, you have disturbing thoughts, or you want to shout, or you want to act upon that anger. So that anger is so powerful that the feeble virtuous minds, virtuous actions can be destroyed by that anger. Like the potential for these virtuous minds and virtuous actions to ripen into something pleasant or something useful for you to transform your mind, that potential can be destroyed by anger. But if we dedicate properly and sincerely, that any good action that I have been doing in the last, when you've been doing a series of good actions, like for example, at the end of this session, we'll dedicate whatever good thoughts we had, whatever, insights we had in our mind, we'll dedicate that so that in the future we might achieve that state of full awakening. So when we do that properly, when we dedicate our virtues properly, these are kind of saved in the bank. They cannot be destroyed by anger, just like the thief in the street cannot take money from us that we don't have with us, right?
So what the process is like? Will we do that again towards the end?
At the end you will see, basically we'll say words to dedicate towards our full awakening, but at the same time mentally, we try to, kind of place our mind there. Yeah.
Okay. And can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Okay. So it is directly related to something that happened to me recently. So I was working in Canada, and my mother met an accident, and she was in ICU. And my other family members were taking care of her. So it was told that she might take 6 months to recover. And I was confused between the expenses that could arrive because of hospital expenses, treatment expenses. So I stayed in Canada while other family members were taking care, so I could send money home.
You?
So I could send money home.
Okay.
Because if I would have quit the job, I was concerned that it might affect the best of healthcare that could be provided to her.
Okay.
And by the time I planned to reach back, a month prior to that, she departed.
Okay.
So I could not even meet her. And there was longing in my mother for sure as well, that she wanted to see me, but she could not. And prior to her death, her body's death, I would say, I was Buddhist curious atheist.
I see.
I was not religiously Buddhist. I was Buddhist curious and mainly recognized myself as irreligious atheist. But after my mom's departure, I experienced many incidents for about 3 to 4 weeks of paranormal events in the home. And it happened not just in Delhi home, but also in my Canada home. So at that point, I got to understand that the things I had been rejecting in Buddhism as something which I was not accepting from a scientific modern science point of view. I understood that there are a lot of things that I don't comprehend. So one of the big things that had been troubling me, since I could not even know my mother's last wishes, and she had tried to communicate her presence in form of lights and music turning on and off by themselves.
Okay, so what we can do is discuss at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And here we'll try to remain on the. So sorry for your loss.
It's completely fine.
We'll try to talk about the the truth of suffering, the 3 different kinds of suffering we are going through. But if you want, we can talk at the end of the session.
Yeah, sure.
We can talk, the 2 of us, about your mother and those events that you're describing.
Yep. So, I mean, I had to discuss about the suffering aspect, but it's fine.
Okay, please.
Oh,
If
okay.
you want to discuss about the suffering
Yeah.
aspect. Yes.
So, one of the things that had been bothering me a lot is that since I could not even know what her wishes were and what would give her happiness and would ease her suffering as well. So, relating to the topic of last week, dedication of merit. So I want to know that by dedicating merit to my mother, is there a way that has been prescribed by Buddhist masters that how we can dedicate merit?
Of course.
And would it ease her suffering in the Bardo period?
Yes.
And also, could it affect the quality of her rebirth?
When did she pass away?
It's been 41 days now.
41 days, okay.
Yep.
So, yeah, in the Buddhist teachings, we talk about a period from 7 to 49 days in the between two lives. Now, what we call the Bardo. Bardo in Tibetan means in between two lives. So there is a chance after 41 days, that her mind didn't yet find, a new body, didn't take rebirth yet. There is a chance, there is a possibility. But even if it's not the case, even if she already took rebirth in any kind of existence, for example, what we'll do here tomorrow, we'll do a puja that is called Medicine Buddha Puja. These kind of prayers and practices are especially, beneficial, of course, for us, but also for the people we know who are suffering from different kinds of sicknesses or obstacles, or they have problems, but also specifically for the people who recently passed away, but not necessarily recently. Anybody, we would like to pray for who passed away, recently or not recently, by us engaging in that practice, by us making the effort to, come here, sit, recite the prayers and so forth, by us doing these virtues, doing these merits, what triggered us to do that is for that or those persons. So therefore, indirectly, they're also involved, right? Because if it were not for them, we would not have come to Tushita and do Medicine Buddha or another puja. But Medicine Buddha, particularly beneficial for people who are sick or passed away. So if it were not for them, no trigger to do these practices. Therefore, by us doing these practices, kind of because of them or thanks to them, they also, accumulate merit. And so this might change the outcome of their rebirth or their sickness and so forth.
So can I ask one final question? So let's say if the person with whom I related in this life as my mother, now I would not know, I mean, until probably I'll attain that level of consciousness, enlightenment, or clairvoyance abilities. So prior to that, since I don't know in what form she would be, or what realm she would be in, so if I'll pray and dedicate merit, keeping her this form in mind of her this life.
Yes.
So how does so what's the science behind, or maybe what's the philosophy behind her next rebirth, where she probably might or might not be carrying the memories of her previous life, would affect her coming life? I know these two lives are connected.
We talk about a mental continuum that, from since time immemorial and forever, there's like a continuum. And within that continuum, we have different bodies. So of course, most of us, we don't remember any of our previous lives, even the life immediately prior to this one. We don't have any, memory. But actually, there are many very young children, when they start to speak, they talk about, even though they live, let's say they live in a city, they start describing a house in the countryside, and that house is that color, and the name of my sister is such, the name of my mother is such. And there is one, a few actually scientists who went around the world looking for such children, listening to their stories, and seeing if these, these stories, they match with reality. Like if a child, a very young child who just starts speaking, would describe such a place, such a family, then the scientists, they would go there and try to correlate the information and see, if what the children are speaking about is actually true. And there's a whole book by Ian Stevenson that you can buy, which is just, so many stories like that. But then, of course, these children, after a while, we learn so many new things, we familiarize ourselves with this life, new environment, these memories, they start to fade. And even if children, when they start to speak, they still had a little bit of those memories from the previous life, gradually, for most of those children, this will, will also forget. Yeah.
So,
but
would she
but
be
again,
affected?
this is the topic of today, is the truth of suffering, right? So we are talking about all sorts of things, but not the actual topic. So what I'm interested in, maybe your questions are very interesting. Maybe save them, we can have a discussion afterwards. Sure. What I'm interested in for this discussion is for everyone to exchange their understandings and their opinions about what we were talking about, the three kinds of suffering: suffering of suffering, suffering of change, all-pervasive suffering.
I also have a question from this conversation.
Okay, so maybe we can come back to you.
Yep,
There's a lady there, and yeah.
So when you described everything, it just sounds like we're born in this world of suffering. Every experience seems like suffering, even if it's pleasant, unpleasant. And it seems like we're trying to get rid of them, like purify them, do things to, minimize them. Can it be possible that it is not a bad thing and we should just train ourselves to be okay with it?
What is not a bad thing?
I mean, suffering. I mean, say I'm sick, instead of like just being that I'm suffering, but then being okay with it, that, it is there. It's just another feeling, or I don't know, like say pain or like feeling sad or anger. That might be just another emotion, just like when I feel happy in the sense of like experiencing a pleasant sensation. So just thinking if we can be neutral about suffering as well as like, those ups and downs, can see them equally.
Well, that's a very good question. I think, let's say you were taking the example of being sick. When you're sick already, it's not very pleasant, right? So if you add on to that, if you start to be upset about being sick on top of being sick, so it's not only the body that is sick, but now the mind is also so upset about the current situation, and there's more suffering, So the reason why we identify all these kinds of sufferings and contemplate on them is not to add suffering onto our suffering, but to generate a wish to actually have freedom. At the moment, even if you don't mind too much being sick, even if you don't mind too much that, if you're content with the cheesecake, if you're content with the AC, that it's just temporary happiness, that it's not lasting, that it's not very reliable, even if you're content with that and you're fine with the sufferings that you have, inevitably, because of the karmas we accumulated in the past and because we have not abandoned our disturbing emotions, these small sufferings can become very big sufferings. Now, we talked about people living in countries at war. We talked about people with very difficult diseases, or people suffering from poverty. But this is only even contemplating the human experiences. But you can also try to contemplate the experiences of animals, for example, or the experiences of pretas. You can try to actually, in the text of Lama Tsongkhapa, this graduated path to awakening, Lamrim in Tibetan, graduated path, it talks in great length. I just went through a few examples of suffering we can easily relate to, but it goes in great length in describing the suffering that also animals experience. You can think in the wilderness how animals, they are never really at peace. Even when they sleep, it's as if in a corner of their eye, they are still, alert if a predator is about to come and chase them. Or you can think of the suffering of animals, you can think the KFC, for example, how this food is actually produced. You know, the conditions in which all these chickens are raised, how they are treated until they are sent to the slaughterhouse. Then Lama Tsongkhapa goes into great detail describing the suffering of the pretas. You know, and since we had countless lives, since time immemorial, we have been there numberless times. And until we put an end to our suffering, we'll go there again numberless times in the future. And the suffering of the pretas, much greater than the suffering of the animals, much greater than the suffering of humans. But it's also nothing compared to the sufferings we could get in other forms of existence that, you know, in English we call them hells, for lack of a better word. You know, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who created this place, he used to say that if you take a burning coal and put it, you know, on your skin, that suffering is absolutely nothing compared to the suffering you can experience in such, you know, states of rebirths. Does that help?
It does. I mean, a bit, I guess. But then what's the, I mean, it'll take maybe years or lifetimes to get rid of all your negative karmas and suffering. How do you recommend that in this moment or like in this lifetime we deal with our sufferings and keep going forward?
So,
Without actually getting rid of all the pleasure. I mean, I also want to be in the video game of life, you know, like all those ups and downs.
yes.
I mean, the contrast. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, he would say you cannot experience, you know, the highs if you don't know the downs, and that is true, and the opposite also, you know. But also, what I wanted to, I forgot to mention that what we want to renounce is not only the evident suffering we talked in great length, it's not only the temporary happiness that is not lasting, but it's the lack of control that we have. That is precisely what we try to renounce. So in the past, we have accumulated countless karmas, virtues, non-virtues. These will inevitably ripen. And now perhaps some virtuous karmas, obviously some virtues or karmas are ripening, especially if you're enjoying this AC, if you're, you know, enjoying this place, if you're having a good time. That is a ripening of virtuous karmas accumulated in the past. But now, we don't have control. When do we experience which karmas? When the karmas, the causes we have created in the past, we don't know when they will ripen. We don't know when all the conditions will come together for which of these karmas to ripen. All of a sudden, there might be a huge storm, right? That's quite likely, actually. There might be a huge storm, power cut, you might get flooded, you know. This would be most likely the results of a negative karma we have accumulated in the past, and we cannot choose. Similarly, you know, there might be someone who comes here and brings us samosas or chocolates. This would be the ripening of a positive karma we have committed. We cannot choose. And this lack of choice, this lack of freedom is precisely what the misery of samsara is. This is more specifically what we want to renounce. The fact that, again, when we die, we'll take rebirth, but we cannot choose where we are going, what kind of experience we'll have, what kind of form we'll have. Will it be human? Will it be an animal? Will it be a preta? And so forth. We don't know. And we cannot choose. We don't have control. This is what we want to renounce. This lack of choice, this lack of freedom. Does that help?
Yeah, so what do we do right now?
So, yeah, it might be discouraging to think it's a long way, but, you know, already when we come here, you know, it shows that we recognize that we want something more, no? We want something more than cheesecake. We want something more than AC. But now, as you were saying, not adding mental suffering on top of our body sufferings already helps in everyday life. Being content with the small pleasures we have already helps, you know? Let's say I order 2 pieces of cheesecake on Zomato and only one reaches. So if on top of that I feel upset, I'm kind of adding suffering onto the suffering, and that is pointless, right? If I'm content with just the piece of cheesecake that came, and let's say I even tip the delivery partner or whatever, then I feel again joy. I'm not adding suffering onto the suffering. No? So I think in everyday life, doing that is very good. Yeah. Anybody wanted to react to what you were saying? Yes, just behind you.
So just trying to add to the discourse here. When I started practicing meditation a couple of years ago, right before that, I was quite anxious about a lot of things. I used to perceive a lot more feelings. I used to be given to a lot more passion. The angers were, like the episodes of anger were a lot more pronounced. I was a lot more euphoric when, things went my way. But having practiced this form of meditation and whatever little initiation into Vajrayana Buddhism, that has conditioned me in a way that, even if something hurtful comes my way, nothing too extreme, but even if something hurtful comes my way, there is a very tempered response to it, a very graded response to it. And since compassion is such a core element of this practice, I put that to practice in these kind of episodes as well. So just to give an illustration, there was this fellow, I was outside a temple, I had parked my car, and he was very scornful, very, very angry, and he used the worst of words in Hindi to me. And I internalized that hate, because I thought to myself after this sort of conditioning that the moments I spend in hatred towards him, it's going to be futile for him as well as for me. Earlier, I used to give it back, and then I used to be very penitent about it. I used to feel very bad about it. So now I just wished well for him. So when you broaden your sense of compassion, the lowest hanging fruit is your best friend, your closest family member. And then you sort of gradually extend it to perhaps even Hitler. That helps sort of measure your response a lot. And I also feel that, again, a very central part of this practice is watching your thoughts as clouds. You will understand that, that solid presence that Nico, you spoke about at the beginning, that solid presence is not really there. The concept of shunyata, you're really not there. I mean, you are only there relative to something. So the I, the me, all of that, if that dwindles down, then I think, but the flip side of that is I also don't feel that much happy anymore, that sort of, earlier I used to be very happy.
Right. The small pleasures, they don't
absolutely
push you to the roof anymore.
They don't. To put it at its most basic level, I'm a professional. If a client paid me money earlier, that was like, wow, payday, right? But now it's like, okay, I have enough to sustain myself. I have enough to contribute towards causes I feel for. And I'm happy, I'm fortunate for that. But even if something deplorable were to happen, it's not going to break me or shake me to that extent.
I think the more we study, the more we contemplate, the more we meditate, then gradually our emotions are more in control because of our understanding and familiarization with the teachings of the Buddha. So, one of what happens when we have this self-grasping ignorance and we feel we are the center of the universe and everything revolves around us and we want to cherish our I, our me, then there is this inevitable push and pull that is happening, We want all the small cheesecake, AC, so forth, and we want to run away from all the, being in the rain or, things we don't like. So gradually, as we study, meditate, contemplate, our mind becomes more equanimous, towards these kind of events, towards people. You were describing these people in front of the temple and so forth. Everything becomes more stable. I lived in a Buddhist monastery for about 5 years. And I remember when I arrived there, I thought, the monks, like their face are so neutral. There was one in particular who was, it felt like I could never make him either happy or angry. He was so neutral and equanimous. Whatever happened, his face was always the same and the same towards everyone. And, in the beginning I thought, this monk doesn't have any, joy. But then later, after studying more and spending 5 years, I understood that it's actually the sign of someone who actually practices, the sign of a practitioner, becomes more equanimous in his emotions, more equanimous towards people, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, payday happens. Instead of jumping to the roof, he will just be content. So somebody comes and insults him to his face, he will also remain kind of neutral and not be upset about it, will not react with anger, will not add more suffering onto the situation. Yeah.
So just to add one more short anecdote to this.
And it's already quite late and we didn't do the analytical meditation yet. So please keep it very short.
No, so someone just told me that, you never seem too happy. And I retorted that, either a madman is too happy or someone who's completely liberated is too happy. You can't sustain being too happy for too long, just like that.
You think the Buddha cannot sustain his happiness?
No, if you're absolutely liberated, yes. So I see the Rinpoches, they're always smiling. They have that equanimity, but with a smile.
Yes.
And I see the madman also always smiling. So that level.
Okay. I think more of you wanted to interact, and we will have we'll do the meditation now, the analytical meditation. But after the meditation, we can continue the discussion, and especially we can continue talking about the 3 kinds of suffering and experience we had about the meditation, if the meditation made sense to us, and whatever thoughts came during that meditation. So again, we can come back to a comfortable posture. Coming back to the body, coming back, bringing our attention again to the cushion or the chair we're sitting on, paying attention to our breath, inhaling and exhaling deeply so that the stomach rises and falls. As we inhale, trying to refresh our attention. As we exhale, trying to relax. So in this meditation, we are going to reflect on suffering, on dukkha in Sanskrit, or dukh, or unsatisfactory conditions. It is interesting to reflect that the very first thing that the Buddha taught after reaching full awakening, after having realized non-duality after having experienced the nature of things directly, he remained silent for 49 days, and then the very first thing he taught is the truth of suffering. When we want to reach a state of freedom, when we want to reach a state of liberation, it is important to understand what the Buddha meant at that time when he thought that suffering, when he thought that dukkha as a truth, when he proclaimed the truth of suffering. We have to understand what we want to liberate ourselves from, what kind of freedom we want to achieve. So we are going to do a brief meditation on that, the different kinds of suffering, the sufferings that are our present reality, for us to get a clear picture. We can simply begin by taking a few moments and work with the recognition that the suffering of samsara, the suffering of being trapped in cyclic existence, that is our current experience. Whether we like it or not, due to our karmas and disturbing emotions, our current reality, our current experience is samsaric. The way our mind experiences reality right now is samsaric. It is like a cycle of recurring mental and physical dissatisfaction. Let us contemplate that merely having the body and mind that we currently have, this is inviting all kinds of experiences, difficulties, disease, unpleasant experiences. The most obvious kind of suffering that we experience is the gross, the evident suffering of pain. Physical, mental pain. Having been born, aging, becoming sick, dying, having experiences that we don't want to have, not obtaining what we want, and so on and so forth. Reflect for a moment on the variety, the many types of different experiences that are pain in your life. Try to reflect in your life all the experiences that are clearly suffering, be it physical suffering or mental suffering, such as anxiety, fear, depression. Try to remember all the evident experiences of suffering that you had in your life. Now, in addition to these very obvious experiences of suffering, these many kinds of experiences of suffering, on top of that, we also constantly experience the suffering of change. Because of the ever-changing nature of reality, because of impermanence, we do not have any stability. We don't have security or certainty in life. Whatever pleasurable experiences we have, such as eating cheesecake, they're only temporary. Sooner or later, negative karmas will ripen and we will experience again pain, unpleasant experiences, suffering and fear. Within samsara, there is no truly lasting happiness for us. The Buddha saw that. He saw that in samsara, there is no final security. He saw that this change of suffering, the pleasures that we experience, are unsatisfactory. Let us meditate for a moment on the impermanent, the ever-changing, unsatisfactory nature of all phenomena within samsara, remembering the pleasures we have experienced in this life that did not give us any final satisfaction. They did not truly satisfy us. You can recall, for example, a beautiful holiday that you are reminiscent of, that you really enjoyed. At the mountain or at the beach. Does such a holiday have the potential to make you truly happy, fully satisfied? Can such a holiday give you a happiness that will remain forever, that will never degenerate, that will never turn into unpleasant experiences? Perhaps after a while you would get bored, you would fall sick, receive some bad news. Then on a more subtle level, we constantly make the experience of what is called all-pervasive suffering, all-pervasive compounded suffering, which means that there is not one moment, not even a second, where we are not under the control of our karma and disturbing emotions. Our body and mind are totally conditioned. They are totally under the control of the karmic potential we have created in the past. And these karmas that we have engaged in the past are due to ignorance, self-grasping ignorance, which is the root of all the other delusions, disturbing emotions that arise from that ignorance. Contemplate for some time how our disturbing emotions, they are constantly present, they are all-pervading. How this body and mind, how they are a product of karma and these afflictions, these delusions, and how this body and mind are therefore in the very nature of being unsatisfactory. Check for yourself what that means for you. So because of this, we experience constant ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster, ups and downs within our mind, as well as in our life, our health, in our relationships, ups and downs at work. Sometimes positive karma ripens, and we experience temporary happiness. We experience a high status, we experience success or a good reputation. Then again, bad karma ripens, and we experience the end of that happiness. We might experience a low status, we might experience failure, we might experience criticism, bad reputation. you can reflect that whatever we achieve, we necessarily have to lose again, living in a constant longing for what we do not have. And constantly being separated from what we want. Then as soon as we get it, as soon as we obtain what we want, still there is dissatisfaction. For being never quite content with what we get, wanting more, wanting better. Try to see how that plays out in your own life. And now reflect that this cycle of dissatisfaction not only happened in this life, but in beginningless lifetimes before this life, without a beginning. And let us contemplate that all this is rooted in self-grasping ignorance, grasping at inherent existence, grasping at objective existence, a truly existing, independent I, me, that we want to cherish more than anything else. See how we are nourishing a truly existing I, an inherent I, that in fact does not exist truly, does not exist objectively, independently. It appears to be existing objectively, and on the basis of that appearance, we grasp at it. All the other disturbing emotions arise. We engage in karmas and we experience the fruit of these karmas. So because of that self-grasping ignorance, we have been going through suffering without beginning until now. Let us try to recognize this situation we are in. This total lack of freedom that is samsara. Let us recognize that lack of freedom is suffering. and that suffering is a truth, it is our current reality. Try to see that clearly. And from that recognition that we are trapped in samsara, let us try to generate an urge of wanting to be free from that. Wanting to be free from any kind of suffering. An urge, a wish, wanting yourself to be free from suffering. Getting yourself out of that endless cycle of misery. By using the great potential that we have in this life. Using this potential to break free from misery. How do we break free from suffering? Is by renouncing the causes of suffering. By clearly understanding the causes of suffering and attaining the cessation from that. Definitely wanting to emerge from suffering, getting out by renouncing the cause, the self-grasping ignorance, the root of all our problems. And before we continue our discussion, let us also take a short moment to conclude this meditation by dedicating whatever positive potential we might have created by coming here today, hearing about the truth of suffering, discussing about it, contemplating on it. Let us dedicate this potential towards that goal of becoming totally liberated. By seeing clearly the nature of dissatisfaction of our experiences, wanting to be free from that cycle. May we be able to renounce the cause of suffering by clearly establishing wisdom in our minds, by clearly establishing the antidote, the opposite of the self-grasping ignorance, by clearly establishing the wisdom that realizes the emptiness of objective existence of the self and all phenomena in our mind. By listening, reflecting, and meditating on the teachings of the Buddha, may we very soon attain true cessation of suffering, not only for our personal benefit, but for the benefit and ultimate awakening of every being. May this discussion and meditation become a cause for the ultimate happiness of all beings. You can gently come out of the meditation. And if you want, we can continue our discussion, especially if you would like to share something about the meditation we just did, or more thoughts about your understanding and experience of the truth of suffering, or anything that you wanted to express earlier but didn't have the opportunity. Yes, and online I think you can also unmute. Let me check. Yes, online if you would like to interact, feel free also.
So you presented three aspects of suffering. One is the very evident one, which is more painful in nature, while there is contradictory to that, which is pleasurable in nature and fleeting. So you also mentioned about the experiences that are neutral. And I think maybe this is my miscomprehension of what the Bodhi state is. But I was of the opinion that any craving or any dislike, both has to be let gone, and only then we attain the Bodhi state. So isn't that the neutral state? And then how does those neutral experiences contribute to suffering then?
So whether or not we have pleasant or unpleasant experiences, even when we have neutral experiences, we don't experience joy or pain, when our feeling is neutral, even in that state, even in the states of happiness, temporary happiness, what all pervasive compounded suffering means is that we are still trapped in samsara at that time. Even the positive karmas we have accumulated in the past, the virtuous karmas, such as practicing generosity, helping others, and so forth, yes, inevitably they will ripen in the form of a pleasant experience, some form of joy in the future. But within cyclic existence, within that conditioned existence, we cannot choose when that will ripen. We do not know how our evening is going to unfold, right? So this lack of freedom is precisely what this all-pervasive compounded suffering is. Because of the karmas, the afflictions that we have not abandoned, we have this current body and mind that is also the basis for accumulating more karmas and perpetuating the cycle.
But the neutral experience themselves, would they also contribute to karma, or is it like that is what the ideal aspiration or state of mind shall be?
Karma means action, right? So if we don't engage in an action, we are not accumulating karma.
And since thoughts are running continuously, regardless of whether we are doing it consciously or not. So even at the state where the mind is like have reached almost shunyata.
Sorry?
When mind has almost reached shunyata, I forgot the English term for that. So, and let's say we are not taking physical actions.
We are not?
Taking physical actions.
Okay.
With the body or with the speech. So would generation of any sort of intent also contribute to karma?
So, yeah, again, from the Sanskrit, the literal translation of karma is action, no? But of course, what really defines if a karma is virtuous or non-virtuous is the intention or the kind of the mental action, no? But if there is no action, there is no karma. You know, we talk about non-virtuous actions that are physical, verbal, and mental, but strictly speaking, the non-virtuous actions of the mind, they are these, you know, disturbing emotions, these afflictions that have been with us since time immemorial, and that will be with us until we realize shunyata, which is like cutting the root, the source, the cause of these.
Okay. So I think I would have to experience it to know it exactly. I mean, intellectually, I'm trying to make sense, but
yeah, I think
I know it's not.
It's good to, if you can read more books from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, watch more lectures from His Holiness the Dalai Lama on YouTube. There are so many. And other teachers also. You can listen from teachings from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for example. You know, who describe and talk about all these. So yeah, need to. That's what the Buddha meant by, you know, studying, contemplating, meditating. To contemplate, first we have to have heard the teachings, no? Then we can chew on them. And once we have, you know, once we contemplate on them, then we can try for these teachings to become our own experience. We can meditate on them. These are the three wisdoms the Buddha talked about. Wisdom of listening, contemplating, meditating. So of course, at the beginning, we need to study or listen. We need to hear about the teachings. Anybody else would like to say something? It's getting very late. Okay, maybe we can leave it there. And again, we can just take a moment to dedicate the merits of our interactions and meditation, the effort we are making to transform our mind. Let us dedicate that so that we may soon, very soon, achieve the state of full awakening in order to be able to guide all beings without exception to that cessation of suffering. May the precious minds in us that have already arisen, such as the minds of compassion, kindness, love, wisdom, and in particular the wisdom realizing shunyata, may these minds never decline but increase more and more. May our precious teachers, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama, have long and healthy lives, so that they may continue to teach us the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, so that they may continue to guide us and make us, allowing us to progress. And finally, due to all the merits we have accumulated in the past, the merits we're accumulating in the present, the merits we'll accumulate in the future, may the wars that are happening around the world come to an end immediately. May there be no new war, may there be no famine, may there be no epidemic, may there be no financial crisis. May there be no disasters of the elements and natural catastrophes, and may peace and happiness prevail in everybody's hearts and lives. So thank you everybody for joining this evening and meditating and exchanging. And for those who are interested, tomorrow we have this Medicine Buddha Puja at the same time, 6:30, also online and in person. Very beneficial, especially if you have people around you passed away that you would like to dedicate this puja for, people who are suffering from sickness or have obstacles. Then on Wednesday we have our weekly online debate class, also 6:30 p.m. And as usual, every morning at 9 a.m. we also have a half an hour online meditation that you can, actually if you're not available at 9 a.m. you can also watch it later. It's recorded and uploaded onto YouTube later. All our sessions actually are recorded and uploaded onto YouTube later. The next week we'll continue these discussions. We'll have a Vajrasattva practice also to purify negative karmas. And then the following week, we have Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdul who will teach here on, so that's Monday, 8 September. He will teach on a text by Pabongka Rinpoche that is called The Heart Spoon. It's a text that encourages us to recall impermanence. Then that same week, on the Saturday, the 13th of September, we have Venerable Geshe Tenzin Zopa, who is coming back for an afternoon of teachings on a sutra that is called the Rice Seedling Sutra. And then a few days later, we have Kabirji, who used to be the teacher here for many years, who is now based in Bodh Gaya. So he's visiting Delhi for just 2 or 3 days. So he's going to teach on the 15th and 16th. Yeah, and then more teachers will most likely visit in October. As soon as it's confirmed, we'll announce also on our groups and WhatsApp and so forth and website. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.